Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! A while back, I was working in an office that allowed dogs. It was an open floor plan, and since customers never came into the office, we kept the dogs' food and water bowls right by the front door, just because it was the most convenient space, and no one else would see them but us who worked there. Of the 6 of us who worked in the main office area, I was the only one who didn't have a dog. No pets policy at the apartment, and always felt horribly left out. To make matters worse, across the way was a doggy daycare. One day, a very frantic woman came in and she had an absolutely massive basset hound with her. Usually, the only people who came into the office were associates, who had appointments with someone working there, but it was rare they brought their dogs. She ran up to me and said, "Do you work here?" And I said, "Yes, how can I help you?" And she said, "I wasn't sure if you took walk-ins, but I read online I could just drop him off. I tried to call but no answer." I didn't know what she was talking about at that point, and I said, "Come again? Who did you call exactly?" Thinking if I could just saddle her off to whoever she came to see, I wouldn't have to decipher her problem. She said, "Well, it doesn't matter now. Look, something urgent has come up and I really need to leave him here. Here is his food he likes and I'll be back in a few hours." And at this point, I wasn't thinking of the doggy daycare. I thought maybe she was a friend of someone here. I said, "Well, alright. Can I get your name, please?" And she said her name and then asked if I needed her to sign anything. And I was so confused at this point, I just said, "Why would I need you to sign something?" And she left almost immediately. So I took Otis, the dog, to the back and showed him to my co-workers, and no one knew the woman or the dog. I was worried she wouldn't come back, but at the same time, my wish for an office dog had been granted. And Otis was supremely chill. All he did all day was lie around and drool onto his own ears. I just freshened him up every now and then, took him out every couple hours, and he was happy as a clam on a big cushy dog bed we thankfully had an extra of. He just loved attention from anywhere he could get it. At the end of the day, the woman, thank God, came back. She said, "Thanks, you're a lifesaver. How was he?" And I said, "He was a champ." I was about to say, "But why is he here?" when she said, "That's a relief. Most kennels say he get anxious around other dogs. I heard you operated at a much higher capacity, and I was thrilled to see you had so few clients in a room at one time. So, how much do I owe you?" And that's when I realized she thought we were a dog daycare. Now, I probably should have corrected her, but I loved my day with the office dog and I didn't want to get paid for supervising this strange dog all day. I just threw out a number that sounded fair and appropriate. "That'll be $20. I said. She replied, "Really?" in this very high tone. And I couldn't tell if I'd overshot or undershot, but she paid me and left. My co-workers were laughing hysterically when they realized what had happened, and we thought it would be just a good story for the future. But the next week she came back. She said we were so much more affordable and less overcrowded than her other place that she was happy to use us. I was glad for the company, so I just took him. I didn't think there was any way she couldn't have at least some idea we weren't a dog daycare. The whole ordeal was so strange I just figured, don't question a good thing. I was much younger and dumber then. Not long after, Otis started getting dropped off too, sometimes even 3 or 4 days a week. I was in heaven. He was such a love and he made fast friends with the delivery guys and visitors. One day we took our office Christmas card photo and Otis was over that day. So we included him. In a Santa hat, it was pretty great. But then it turns out Otis' owner was friends with one of our clients who I guess happened to have the card out on her table or was kind enough to display it alongside her other holiday cards. Because one day Otis' owner came in holding the card and walked up to me and said, "I can't even believe I'm asking this, but is that my dog in this photo? This isn't a dog daycare at all. This is just an office, isn't it?" She said it with a note of surprise. as though she was looking around and putting it all together for the first time. No coincidence that this was the first time she wasn't in some crazy rush either. She was like, "Then who are all these other dogs?" And I explained. I was terrified she was going to demand her money back or worse, take some sort of legal action against us for misrepresenting ourselves as a dog daycare business or complain to the corporate. But instead she basically said, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" And I explained we just really liked having Otis around. She stopped for a minute and seemed to be thinking and said, "Is that right?" And I said yes, and told the story of how I was the only one in the office without a dog, so I loved the company. She seemed a little flummoxed or hesitant, understandably, because the whole thing was so weird. She turned to my coworker and asked if I was telling the whole truth. I don't know why she thought my coworker, also a stranger to her, was any more trustworthy than me, but hey, strange times. And the coworker backed me up. So she said, "Well, I wish you'd said something sooner. Could have saved me a lot of embarrassment with my friend back there. Alright, I have to get going. See you at 4. And she left Otis. I couldn't believe it. I said, "So he can stay?" And she replied, "Where else could I find someone to watch him one-on-one all day for $20? And off she went. Otis stayed my office dog until his family moved away. Luckily, right around the same time I took a new job. With all this time sitting around doing nothing, I thought it was as good a time as any to tell that story. You know, there is something magical about Friday nights that just feels like a warm hug after a long week. This particular Friday was no exception, and it had a bonus. We were headed to Giuseppe's, kind of place that served pasta that could make you weep with joy. For a 17-year-old who's spent more time in hospitals and at school parties, these little outings with my parents are like gold dust. "Dad, can you make sure they have that table I like? The one by the little fountain?" I asked as he packed my wheelchair into the trunk. He smiled. "Already called ahead, Mia. They are expecting us," he replied. Mom chimed in from the driver's seat, "And they better have that tiramisu you love so much, or we will just have to make our own." The drive over was filled with our usual banter, Mom and Dad teasing each other about who was a better cook. I chimed in now and then, but mostly I just soaked up the love. Giuseppe's was only a 10-minute drive, but those were the best 10 minutes of my week. We arrived just as the sun began to dip down. Dad unfolded my wheelchair and helped me transition from the car seat with practiced ease. As he pushed me toward the entrance, I could already smell the garlic and herbs wafting out from the kitchen. The hostess greeted us with a bright smile. "Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Tyler. And Mia, your favorite spot is all ready for you." She led us to the table by the fountain. As we settled in, the waiter, whom I recognized as Marco, a college student who always remembered how I liked my water, no ice with a slice of lemon, came over to take our order. "The usual, Mia?" he asked with a wink. "You know it, Marco. And please tell me that chef's special pasta tonight includes something with truffle oil." I replied. Marco laughed. "I'll check with the chef. Truffle oil makes everything better, right?" He scribbled down our orders and went off, leaving us to enjoy the evening. We hadn't been there long when a family burst through the patio doors. A woman who seemed to be on her own with 3 boys made her way to a table not far from ours. The boys were a whirlwind of energy, immediately darting around the tables with the kind of chaos only a trio of young brothers could muster. "Seems like someone unleashed a pack of puppies," Dad joked. Mom, softly, "Shh, James. Shush, James. Don't jinx us." But her words came too late. One of the kids, the littlest one with a shock of blonde hair, was already pulling at a tablecloth nearby, causing a minor clatter of forks and knives. I sighed, feeling the first threads of annoyance tug at me. Guess it's going to be one of those nights, huh? I said, trying to keep the mood light. Little did I know the chaos was just beginning. Just as Marco came back to our table grinning with the promise of truffle in my pasta, Mom leaned in and whispered, "Hopefully they settle down once they get some food in them." Dad nodded and looked over at the table where Karen and her mini tornadoes were seated. "Maybe they just need a minute to adjust," he said. The hope was short-lived. The youngest boy made a beeline for our table, his eyes locked onto our tablecloth like a bull to a red flag. Before I could even brace myself, he yanked hard on the edge, and our cutlery did a dramatic dance off the table, clattering onto my lap and the ground. "Hey, watch it, kiddo!" I yelled, more startled than hurt. Mom was up in a flash, picking up the utensils and shooting a worried look at me. "You okay, Mia?" "Yeah, just got a fork to the knee, but I'll live," I quipped, trying to brush it off with a laugh, but inside, my frustration was bubbling up. This was supposed to be our peaceful night out. Dad flagged down Marco, who looked mortified at the chaos unfolding around his fate. "Marco, could you maybe have a word with the lady over there? It's getting a bit wild over here," Dad asked. "Of course, Mr. Tyler. I'm really sorry about this. I'll handle it," Marco assured us, then went off to speak with Karen. We watched as he politely asked her to keep an eye on her children, mentioning how other guests were being disturbed. Karen nodded, giving a half-hearted apology and calling her boys over. "Think that'll hold?" Mom asked. "Let's just eat our dinner and enjoy the evening," Dad suggested. We tried to regain the relaxed vibe, laughing over a story Mom shared about her latest book club debacle involving a heated debate over the merits of ebooks versus paperbacks. But the piece was a fragile bubble ready to pop. It wasn't 5 minutes later when Hurricane Harry, the young boy from before, and his brothers launched their next assault, this time racing around their table, which unfortunately included darting in and out of the spaces between ours. I could feel the stares from other tables, the shared discomfort making allies of strangers. "Okay, that's it," Dad said under his breath after a particularly close encounter with a sprinting child nearly knocked over his glass. This time he stood up and went directly to Karen's table. "Ma'am, I understand kids will be kids, but this is a bit much. Could you please keep them at your table?" Dad's voice was calm but definitely meant business. Karen's response was rude. "They are just playing. You were a kid once, weren't you?" "Yes, but my parents taught me about time and place. This isn't a playground." Dad countered before returning to our table. "Nice one, Dad," I murmured. "Just hoping it sticks this time." He sighed. Just when we thought we might get a break, the beast was shattered faster than you could say, "Check, please." The brief calm after Dad's intervention was like the quiet before the storm. Sure enough, Hurricane Harry and his crew were back at it, this time their shenanigans escalating as if they were competing in the Olympics of chaos. One of the boys, let's call him Tornado Tim, decided it would be hilarious to start a game of tag right there among the dinner tables. Then it was a nearby couple's anniversary dinner that became the unfortunate base in this impromptu game. Another diner, a burly man with a deep voice, finally stood up. "Enough! This isn't a playground. Control your children, lady," he yelled. Karen angrily shot back, "Don't you yell at my kids. They are just being children. What's your problem?" "The problem is your kids are ruining everyone's evening." Things were spiraling and well, that's when I decided to pipe up. He's not the only one upset here. We've been trying to enjoy our meals, but your kids have turned this place into a circus. All eyes suddenly turned to me, including Karen's. "Oh, so now you're going to attack me too? Because I have children?" she snapped. "No, because you're not watching them. It's not about them being kids. It's about you letting them run wild," I replied. That seemed to hit a nerve. "You think you can judge me? You sit there in your chair and think you can tell me how to parent my kids?" she shouted. Before I could respond, she reached over to her table, grabbed a glass of water and threw it. It happened so fast, all I saw was the glass flying towards me, and then everything was wet and cold. The glass shattered against my head. I felt sharp pain, a shard fell into my lap. The restaurant erupted. My mom was up in seconds. "You crazy woman!" she yelled as she lunged at Karen, knocking her back with a force that sent chairs tumbling. Dad was at my side instantly, gently checking my head. "Mia, stay still, sweetheart. Let me see," he said. Marco rushed over saying, "I'm calling 911. The chaos around us blurred into a mess of shouting and shuffling as people tried to intervene and separate Mom and Karen, who were now a tangle of limbs and angry shouts and occasional swings. Then finally, police cars and an ambulance pulled up outside Giuseppe's. As paramedics rushed in, Dad stayed by my side. He gently dabbed at the cut on my forehead with a napkin. Looks like it's just a small cut, but we will let the pros take a look, Dad said. Meanwhile, police officers began taking statements from the witnesses. Mom was standing a few feet away, talking to an officer. After giving her statement, she walked over to us. "How are you holding up, sweetie?" Mom asked, kneeling beside my wheelchair and taking my hand. "I'll be okay, Mom. Just didn't expect dinner and the show." The paramedics checked me over, confirming it was a minor cut, but they suggested a trip to the ER just to be safe because of the glass. As they helped me onto a stretcher, Karen was also being attended to. "Will she be arrested?" I whispered to Dad. "It looks like it. Assault was a weapon, even if it's just a glass." The ride to the hospital was quick, the paramedics making sure I was comfortable. Dad followed in his car while Mom rode with me, holding my hand the whole way. Everyone in the ER was incredibly kind. After a thorough checkup, they gave me a clean bill of health, a small bandage as a souvenir, and the instructions for follow-up care. We finally got home late that night. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, and ready to forget the whole ordeal. "Think we'll ever go back to Giuseppe's?" I asked Mom. "Maybe for takeout," Mom said. "But let's stick to quieter dinners for a while, okay?" Dad popped his head in. "How about I make us all breakfast in the morning? My famous pancakes." "Deal. Well, let's keep it low-key. No more excitement," I said as they said goodnight and turned off the light. Tomorrow would be a new day, but for now, I just want to rest, recover, and maybe just let myself believe in the simple, quiet moments again. While my husband collects out-of-work-related incidents like a politician collecting bribes, I only have 3 of my own. This is one of them. This happened in the spring of 2018. My mother had traveled abroad to visit one of her relatives, so when she was flying back, I went to get her. We live about 3 hours away from the airport. Because our oldest was recovering from a stomach bug, hubby decided to stay home with the kids and I will get my mother and bring her home. My mother's flight was scheduled to arrive at 1:15 p.m. But when I got there, I found out they had a 2-hour delay and I had to wait. I thought, alright, I'll enjoy a coffee while I wait, and notified my husband. The weather was good, low 20s Celsius, with no clouds, and I decided to have my coffee on the outside patio of a coffee shop. I grabbed the tablet, and because the airport is a bit windy, a yellow windbreaker. And apparently that was a problem. I was reading my book on my tablet, enjoying my coffee, wearing my yellow windbreaker, when I heard a "Hey you!" I didn't think it was directed at me and continued reading. Then I feel someone looming above me and, "I'm talking to you." I looked up to see a man looking down at me. The following exchange happened. "Yes, where is my rental?" Thinking that he was asking where the rental companies had desks, I replied that they were on the other side of the arrivals area. "Okay, be a good employee and bring it here." "I will certainly not do that. I don't work for the rentals." "Yes, you are. Now go and get it." "No." This thing goes back and forth like we are 4-year-olds when Karen inserts herself in the conversation. "Honey, what takes so long?" Chad says to Karen, "This employee here doesn't want to bring our rental." Karen comes and grabs my windbreaker's label and puts her face uncomfortably close to mine. "Listen, you little brat. Me and my husband are very good clients. I don't care if you're on your break, but if you don't bring the car in 3 minutes, we will get you fired." Me, extremely pissed at that point. "Listen, brat, take your paws off me or we will have trouble." "Oh, you threaten me? Me? Oh, you are so getting fired." At that point, she swings her arm, hitting the coffee, spilling it on a table, missing the tablet, and on me. Me, standing up. "Scramble off, you witch. Go find your own rental." Karen at that point slapped me, while her husband was screaming obscenities. I flipped, and I slapped her back, which initiated a fight. When the initial argument began, a couple of bystanders had taken notice. The shouting had attracted the crowd, and when the fight started, someone called the cops. 2 officers came and separated us. "What happened?" Police Officer 1 asks. Chad says,
This employee refused to help us and then attacked my wife.
I yell, I don't work here, you idiot. And your wife attacked me.
I want to press charges,
Karen adds. Police officer says, okay, all of you are coming with us. We ended up at the airport police station. One officer went to get the manager of the rental company and the other reviewed the tapes with his boss. The rental company manager verified I wasn't an employee. They wear white shirts and black ties and a lanyard with their access ID, and I was wearing a Cthulhu t-shirt and jeans. The cameras verified the attack. I pressed charges and left to get my mother. I'm a long-time lurker, but I have bounced around on sharing the story, as it happened almost 20 years ago, so think it's finally time. I have been a truck driver for years, and in an effort to raise a family and actually have a home life, I decided to take my skills to work for a garbage company. The company I started working for was a huge one in the US. It came with decent pay, great benefits, and the perfect work schedule. Their equipment was substandard, but I didn't care much. The employees at the company, however, were voting on unionizing the location in response to the complaints about management. I really didn't care either way because I was so new that I had zero complaints. Immediately after the contract vote, the operations manager confronted me about why I voted to accept the union contract, and stated he knew I did because only 3 people voted not to, and he knew who they were. I just walked away from the conflict and focused on doing my job to the best of my abilities. I worked hard and would even work as I was eating my lunch on a daily basis, and pushed myself to excel at being efficient at everything I did for them. I came to work sick several times when I should just call in sick and covered many shifts when others called in themselves. One would have thought an employer would appreciate people that are so devoted to their job. In fact, many of the employees there worked just as hard as I did. This employer, however, automatically deducted 30 minutes of time for lunch from each employee. I would actually harass employees that actually took their lunch break. They would push employees to perform more and more each time so that drivers were actually speeding to keep from being written up. Supervisors and managers never commended good performance. I would actually make comments such as, if you don't like it here, McDonald's is hiring. And there is always someone else waiting to take your job tomorrow because drivers are a dime a dozen. Vehicles were not properly maintained when it came to comfort. Equipment, such as air conditioning, never worked. It was no wonder the employees had decided to unionize. This went on for a couple of years before I found myself a target of such treatment. They started pushing me to drive faster and I refused. They daily came and tried to threaten me with disciplinary action if I didn't improve my performance, a performance that I knew was already beyond what I was required to do. One day I finally had enough and told my supervisor, I only have 2 speeds. If you don't like this one, you sure as hell aren't going to like the other. He replied, what is that supposed to mean? I then stated, keep pushing and you will find out. He did, so I showed him what that meant. I started driving the speed limit everywhere I went. Did only what I had to, and noted down each and every delay I faced for months. I took every lunch and every break I was entitled to, once even sitting with an office employee at a table right outside the general manager's window as she shared food he had provided to office personnel. I knew this was pissing them off. Finally, one day they called me into the office and started yelling at me. I informed them that I wanted my shop steward to be present for the meeting. They reluctantly agreed and then proceeded to pull out a stack of my logs out from files to go through during the meeting, in an effort to fire me. When my shop steward arrived and the meeting started, they went through log after log for about an hour before finally conceding that I had done nothing wrong. The meeting ended with them asking me not to share its outcome with anyone else. I just smiled and walked out. As I walked down the stairs from the manager's office, a crowd of employees stood waiting to see the outcome. When they saw my smile, the crowd broke into laughter. I returned to my job and resumed my routine of working hard, but continued to take my lunch breaks. Within a week, as I inspected my vehicle, I noticed it was suddenly equipped with a GPS device. This was at a time when such devices were just hitting the market.
so I knew the harassment was far from over. But I never allowed the opportunity for them to find fault. Before long, my regular truck was regularly taken out of service for repairs, and the replacement I was then assigned was a rusty old death trap. I started to appeal to the union for assistance, but was told there was little they could do since it didn't violate the union contract. I decided I would start looking for other employment, but not before enacting my revenge. For the previous couple of years, the company had assigned me to drive loads of trash to a landfill in the next county, because the disposal fee was much cheaper. When they first instructed me to do so, my supervisor told me not to tell the landfill employees in our county what we were doing because it was a breach of their contract with the county we worked in. However, since they were now harassing me into quitting, I made it a point to be less than subtle, but I was routinely disappearing for long intervals. When a county employee started asking where I had been, I sheepishly replied, "Oh, just over at XYZ County." He replied, "You aren't supposed to go there." I answered, "Oh, really?" He then made a habit of asking where I had been whenever I would disappear for prolonged periods of time. Each time, I would reply, "Oh, I'm not supposed to say." This went on for months as management continued to push me toward quitting. Finally, the day arrived and I walked off the job and quickly found work elsewhere. A few months later, I picked up the local newspaper to find the front page article about how the company had violated the county contract and was being sued. A later article read that the lawsuit ended with a settlement of more than $800,000 being paid to the county. I found out from the employees still working there that the corporate office terminated all of the managers as a result. I sometimes missed the coworkers I once had and missed the job itself, but it was just enough to take the trash out as I left. I was regarded as somewhat of a hero after that by those left behind. As for the immediate supervisor that directly harassed me each day, he kept his job when new management came on board. However, he insisted that he deserved a raise and stated that he would have to quit if he didn't receive one. The new general manager told him that he would need the request in writing in order to try to negotiate with the corporation. When he handed him the ultimatum, the general manager replied, "I will take this as your letter of resignation." My wife recently started a job at the chicken desk at a downtown 5-star hotel. One of her shift supervisors is a relatively young Lebanese guy. Let's call him Douche. Douche is a typical Jersey Shore-looking wannabe. He's got greasy hair, immaculately groomed 3-day growth, and tan skin. The funny thing is, he's also pudgy and overweight, so the whole look just comes across as sad. I've met him a few times and he's smarmy, arrogant, and treats his staff badly. Anyway, from day one, he started hitting on my wife. He initially sent her a text explaining that he took her number from the HR file as he was a dedicated leader who wanted to look after his team. He texted her pretty much before and after every shift, asking her to lunch beforehand or drinks afterwards in order to explain the system to her. These texts later devolved to telling her to sleep well and lots so you can be fully refreshed at work, explaining that he wanted her looking angelic, like you always do. Anyway, there is tons of this random nonsense and he's always calling her pet names like babe, angel, or pretty. My wife tried to keep it professional in her replies, but it was quite clear this guy wasn't going to stop. She also always wears both her engagement ring and wedding band so that there is no excuse. To put this story into context, I am a current serving army officer. As a platoon commander who has led soldiers in Afghanistan, I would say that I know a thing or two about leadership. So his claim that he was just being a dedicated leader just seemed pathetic. I wanted to straight out punch this guy in the face, schoolyard style. But my wife calmed me down as she didn't want to start trouble at her new job, and the supervisor, Douche, could technically assign her the bad shifts. 2 weeks ago, my wife asked me to go pick her up from work. That way, she could introduce me to Douche and the rest of the desk clerks as her husband. I went straight after work, so I was in full uniform and arrived about 10 minutes before her shift ended. I walked straight up to him and introduced myself. I towered a foot over him and gave him my hardest bone cruncher handshake. My voice was friendly, but my eyes were like a hawk. "Good day. My wife told me all about you. She's saying how you're a great leader and always looks after her team." He reddened, mumbled something about being busy, and walked away. I stared at him all the way as he exited the room. My wife and the rest of her team all burst out laughing. Pathetic. A few days after this incident, my wife gets an email from him with the upper management CC'd. Douche works with her every day, so the only reason why he would send her an email in lieu of just telling her would be because he wanted her to get into trouble from the bosses. The email explained that the employees are forbidden from having personal visits during work hours, as it might reflect badly on the hotel. If she was to have someone pick her up, they should wait in the loading area at the back of the hotel. What the heck? I am super angry by now. Again, the wife calmed me down and told me to forget it. I love her, but she can be annoyingly professional sometimes. So I sat down and plotted revenge with 4 of my army mates during our weekly outing session. We decided that the revenge should be subtle and not traceable to me. This rules out physically harming him. We then came up with a series of events that would cruise him for a period of 4 days. Mind you, I did this all while keeping my wife out of it. She would not approve. One, my mates and I went to an internet cafe and spent 3 hours signing up his work email address to all the numbers of strange websites from all the corners of the internet. We surveilled him for when he left work and tailed him to his house. It wasn't hard as he had his shifts courtesy to my wife. After acquiring his address, we waited till dead in the middle of the night, sneaked into the yard, jacked his car up and placed all 4 tires up a tree he had in his front yard. Let him buzzle that one out. 3. Finally, my friends and I called hotel management independently 6 times at varying intervals, pretended we were guests, and complained that we saw him behind the counter looking at inappropriate stuff on the internet. I feigned disinterest when my wife came home excitedly telling me that her leader was late for work as someone had removed his tires and that management had come to ask him a few questions but seized his computer instead when he wasn't there or were going through his emails. A few days later, he was being demoted and moved to a different location across town. 3-star motel owned by the same corporation that is in a very bad neighborhood. I've never told my wife about my involvement.